people manager, dealing in particular with the risk management and health and safety. So for the last 7 years, most of what I did was around risk management and health and safety. So what we did 20 years ago, still valid, but a lot of it's changed, as you'll see as Andy goes through the presentation. It's a lot easier to follow now than it was 20 years ago, hence the need to rewrite the actual document. But just see how we go on, and we're open for questions, as I'm sure Andy will explain that to you very shortly.
We are now actually live on YouTube for the first time ever. Who'd have thought it? Right. Okay. So welcome everybody. Welcome to this chat about risk assessments. Hopefully we'll all gain something from it. Feel free to ask any questions. Right, and before we go any further, Peter's having problems with his audio. Can everybody else hear me okay? Click yes if you can hear us okay.
Yes, it's fine. Yeah, that's absolutely bang on.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, I can only suggest there then, Peter, that it must be something at your end.
Yeah. Andy, you're just a little bit quiet, and my volume's turned up to max.
Okay, well, I'm a very quiet person, as everybody who knows me will tell you. Yeah.
Hey, what?
So I'll try to speak up a little bit, and hopefully we'll get through. As I say, you will be able to review all this on YouTube later as well. Right, okay then. So, risk assessments. Let me move this out of my way. And what I'm planning on talking about. We'll cover these topics, that's the plan. So we'll briefly discuss what a risk assessment is, why we do them, who should do them, a couple of the important definitions when it comes to risk. The risk assessment process itself is a 5-step process. And then we'll talk a little bit about COVID risk assessments, because obviously it's the hot topic at the moment. Okay, but before we do any of that, I've got a question. So in the box there, if you've never conducted a risk assessment, can you click the yes button for me?
Yes, what the hell is that?
On the participants list, if you open the participants list at the bottom.
Yes, oh yeah, okay, thanks.
Yeah, so if you've never done one, click yes. So we're up to 6. 6 have never done them. 7. Ooh. Keep them going. Anyone else never done a risk assessment?
No.
Yeah, click yes for if you've never done one.
Oh.
Okay, right, okay. So we'll say there are a handful of people out there that are telling me they've never done a risk assessment. Right, which is amazing. I'm pleased to see you here tonight if that is the case. Because how you've ever managed to cross a road without being run over, if you've never done a risk assessment, is beyond me. So we've all conducted thousands of them. We spend life more or less doing risk assessments. I've put a few very simple examples there, including crossing the road. We do a risk assessment when we cross the road. We stop at the curb, don't we? We look to see what the hazards are, i.e. vehicles, and we assess the risk to ourselves by crossing the road. Same when we go up a ladder, even drinking a hot drink, you're doing a risk assessment so you don't burn yourself. So, so we're all doing probably hundreds of them, if not thousands of them every day. And every time we go flying, we've got a risk assessment in our handbook that you'll all be super familiar with suites. You're looking at the hazards, which is the sun and the wind, and you're assessing the risk and what controls you're going to do with your emergencies and eventualities. So have we all changed our mind, and do we all accept now that everybody has done lots of risk assessments? I would think we probably all do now. And that process you take when you cross the road isn't much different to a formal risk assessment that you would do at the club. Okay. So what is a risk assessment? There you go. There's a nice long-winded definition, which I unashamedly stole from Wikipedia. So it's the combined effort of identifying and analysing potential events that may negatively impact people, property, and or the environment, and making a decision on the tolerability of the risk on the basis of a risk analysis while considering influencing factors. So you're all going to manage to remember all that word for word, I am sure. But to put it simply, the risk assessment is a tool by which we can manage risk. Straightforward. Okay. So why would we do a risk assessment? They're a necessary step in ensuring safe model flying club site or event. If you don't know or understand the hazards around you, you're putting yourself, your fellow flyers and public at risk. I think, or I would hope we could all accept that. Can we all accept that is probably how things are? Yeah?
Yeah.
Excellent. That's what I like. So we'll talk about then who can conduct a risk assessment. I did have a telephone call and an email exchange with a gentleman a few weeks ago who thought that they perhaps needed a professional risk assessor in to sort this out. And I explained that actually that's not really the case. We just need somebody who's knowledgeable and competent. An experienced model flyer is ideal for doing a risk assessment at a model flying club. You're aware of what the hazards are and what the risks are, what can go wrong. You definitely do not need to be a professional risk assessor. We're lucky that we've got Kevin, who's got a huge amount of experience in this. I'm certainly not a professional risk assessor. So it's not something to be afraid of. And I think perhaps over the years, people have sort of shied away from formal risk assessments on the basis they think it's rather too challenging. But it definitely isn't. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, I would say historically it was over-facing and did seem very, very challenging. The format now is very straightforward, very simple. And as Andy says, any knowledgeable and competent individual who in our case will most likely be an experienced model flyer is perfectly capable of doing this. They fully understand the risks and, you know, that are there before them that they need to control.
So yes, any of you should be able to conduct a risk assessment, apart from Gordon, who looks like he's fast asleep. Right, so I'll move on to a couple of very important definitions when we're considering the assessment of risk. And the first one is hazard. What is a hazard? Basically anything that can cause harm. I've put a few examples there, but I'm sure with no thought at all, we can all come up with thousands of different things that can cause harm in one way or another, from, I don't know, eating a toffee and getting it stuck in your throat to playing with fire. We all know what the hazards are.
Yeah, a very easy one to remember is ice. You know, ice is a hazard. The risk is you might fall through it. The control is not to walk on it. And that's a very easy way to remember.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Kevin. So that's the hazard. And then we've got a definition for the risk itself. So risk is the chance, whether it's high or low, that any hazard will actually cause somebody harm. And we also want to consider that it's also caused damage as well, because when we conduct a risk assessment, we're not just talking about injury to people in the model club environment. We're talking about damage to property as well. Okay. And then, so the risk assessment itself, as I mentioned earlier, it's a 5-step process. So step 1, we identify the hazards. Step 2 is assessing the risk. And then we control the risks, record our findings, and then we review the controls we've got in place. And that's it. that's your risk assessment done. But obviously, I think for the sake of this presentation, we'll go into a little bit more detail. So step one then, identifying the hazards. And this is something you probably do every time you go to the flying site without realizing, but having a formal assessment in place, it's very good as an aid memoir. So we look around the flying site and consider the activities and what harm can be caused by them. And things to consider there is how members operate, how they use their equipment, what fuels are being used. You know, they're using petrol. Is it flammable? Is there a risk of burning? Any safe or unsafe practices? Perhaps unrestrained models, things like that. The general state of your flying site. Ensure you haven't got trip hazards, especially anybody carrying a model out from the pits with an engine running. You know, things like that. And then the bottom one there, members' flying skills. You know, the beginners, the hazard is greater, clearly, as they don't have the skills. So if you want to suggest any other hazards, I'm sure we could all, if we put a little bit of effort, suggest some hazards. So feel free to unmute yourself and suggest some hazards from the flying site.
We have at the moment bulls in the next field, bulls and cows, and we have to go through gates to get through that corner of the field. And it's been in the news lately where that guy was killed. So we have to be careful at our site, only for the moment.
Yeah, no, it's a very valid hazard. They're quite hefty beasts, aren't they? And you're not going to come out on top with an angry bull or a slightly stroppy cow either, as we probably all know from other aspects of life. Anybody else like to suggest some hazards they've got at the flying site?
If I can. One hazard we have is the proximity of footpaths adjacent to the flying site, and also farmers' tracks which are open to public access.
Dylan, yeah.
Yeah, it's what I was going to say about how much the environment that we fly in affects the safety aspects. Like if you've got a road nearby, the wind direction will have an impact on that.
Yeah,
but that's pretty much covered by the handbook and the suites in the handbook.
Yes. Yeah,
hence the reason why they're there. Yeah.
That's it. It's just a prompt as perhaps we ought to put in the handbook and make it a little bit clearer about the suites, that actually this is a personal risk assessment you're doing every time you go and flying.
And that's what people really don't understand, and they don't have that the conception that that's the reason why they're there. Because if the wind direction is blowing towards the road, you'd be quite foolish to fly if you had a low-powered model in a really high wind, because that would be your risk.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for that. Right, so after our step one then, where we've identified the hazards, we then have to assess the risks. So decide how likely it is that somebody could be harmed and how serious it could be from these hazards. To assess the level of risk, there's a few things we need to consider. First of all, who might be harmed and how. You all also ought to consider in there what could be damaged and how. So, vehicles, buildings, that sort of thing. What are you already doing to control the risks? Most clubs will already have something in place. A lot of clubs that haven't done a formal risk assessment have probably, without realising, arrived at the club rules that they use on site through a form of risk assessment, but it's probably been a little bit informal. So yes, you look at what you're already doing to control any risks, what further action you need to control the risks, who needs to carry out the action, and when the action is needed by. So when you're doing a risk assessment, if you're finding that you've a concern of one of the hazards I mentioned was members' flying skills. So, some further action you could take there is to perhaps introduce some better training for beginners, perhaps either via the achievement scheme or some form of formal training process. So that could be further action that you could take. Okay, so that's the assessing the risk side of things. And then we move on to controlling the risks, which is step 3. So look at what you're already doing and the controls you already have in place yourself. So, and from the hazards you've identified, can you get rid of the hazards altogether? You know, we know a spinning propeller is a hazard. We can't get rid of that altogether and carry on what we're doing. So we then have to decide how we can control that risk so that harm is unlikely. So, you know, things like, as we do, and myself and some of the other examiners in front of us have probably done star jumps in front of the aircraft when the student's about to start it for his A test. You know, we control that risk by asking our stroppy examiners to move behind the aircraft, don't we? So that's a very basic control of risk that everybody can take. So we have to accept that we can't get rid of all the hazards. We just have to get them down to a level that we're prepared to accept. Okay, so if we do need further controls, we need to identify and implement any practical measures. As I've mentioned earlier about perhaps unrestrained models. So a practical measure there is to insist that all models are restrained. It's all very, very straightforward stuff that we're all probably very, very familiar with, but it is useful going through all these things on a fairly regular basis because things change, technology changes. So it's a very valid thing to be doing. Training and educating members. Again, not just flight training, but training and educating on the ground and various aspects of battery management, for example. All these things help to control the risks. I've put there redesigning site layouts and features. Was it Terry that mentioned the road and things like that? It is something I've, on a number of occasions, been along to a club site and they're having issues, and we have suggested a complete layout change of the flying site to reduce risk. So don't be afraid to do that. You know, one of them was fairly straightforward. Let's all stand at the other side of the flying site, and then we're not having to fly with the sun in our eyes. You know, things like that. It's a valid control to put in place. So don't be afraid of redesigning your flying site if you've identified a hazard which presents a risk that you're not prepared to accept. Okay. So once you've identified any controls, make sure they're in place. As I mentioned on the previous slide, you're not expected to eliminate all risks. It's just simply not possible. Same as in life in general, it's not possible to eliminate all the risks. But we do everything reasonably practical to protect people and ourselves from harm, don't we? So we can't eliminate the risk when we cross the road, but we can take reasonable practical steps such as stopping, looking and listening. I think the old Green Cross Code, which we don't hear about anymore, which, you know, what was the Green Cross Code if it wasn't a risk assessment for crossing the road? Okay. So, yeah, you can't eliminate the risk entirely, so we do what's reasonable and practicable. Then it's quite important to record our findings. So, and there are 6 elements really that need recording when you're doing a risk assessment. First of all, the hazards themselves. So once we've identified them, we need to make a note of them. Who might be harmed and how? So some of these will be familiar from the 5-step assessment. What you're doing to control the risks, what further action you need to take, who needs to carry out the action, when do they need to carry out the action by, and a note of when the action has actually been completed. Okay, so that's everything that we're recording. We have on the Club Support website, just pardon me a moment. We have a template for risk assessments, which you can download. If you go to the clubsupport.bmfa.uk and in the download section, there's a risk assessment template there. And all those questions that you've just seen, they're all there on the template for you to complete. And once you've done that, keep that on file. But remember, quite importantly, to review it quite regularly. Okay, so on a regular basis, you might just decide every 6 months you're going to review your risk assessment. It's not a major task. There's no reason at all not to do it. And you're ensuring that the controls you've put in place are working. Now, you might need to review them more often. It may well be you've realised that a control isn't any longer effective, so you might have to consider further controls. It's good practice to review them after any incident that leads to harm to people or damage to property, after any near misses, and if any members raise concerns. First step perhaps is to review the controls involved in your risk assessment. Once you have reviewed them, don't forget to update the risk assessment record with any changes that you've made.
I think one thing to mention here, Andy, is that it is a living document.
Yeah.
As you quite rightly say. And it's in the event that there is a problem, if you can show that you have reviewed, updated, documented over a period of time, then you're certainly fulfilling your obligations. So it is a living document. Don't be afraid to change it.
No, absolutely. And don't be thinking it's a major task, because it isn't. It's a relatively straightforward process, and it's much simplified than it was say 20 years ago. The language involved is much easier to understand.
It's user friendly now. It wasn't then.
It is very user friendly. There's no quotients or all various things that you had to calculate. There's no numbers involved at all anymore, is there?
No, not now, but you are essentially doing the same thing, because you're looking at high, medium and low in terms of effect on individuals or properties. So it's the same thing, but it's just simplified.
Yeah, it's in language we all understand now, isn't it? And,
yes.
And importantly, not just the person that's carrying out the risk assessment, it's in language that everybody else can understand. Okay.
And that is really important, that the risk assessment should be shared so that other people are aware of what you've sort of seen as a problem and how you're trying to control that. Don't just keep it to yourselves. Really important.
No, absolutely.
I think, Kevin, very quickly, those are the two of the fundamentals that we struggled with in Birmingham. In Birmingham City Council, we've probably done about 300 risk assessments altogether across the whole organisation. They're not secret documents, and they are fluid documents that are subject to change and development and revision, because as we see or foresee a risk, we adapt and we change and we nuance it to address that risk. And people struggle with that. They think they're definitive documents that can't be changed.
Absolutely. Nail on the head with that one.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to change it and share.
Absolutely. So I'll move briefly on to talk about COVID risk assessments, because I've been putting various news articles about that over the past week or two since the latest announcements from Boris. So a COVID risk assessment, which is required if you want to operate your club under COVID secure guidance and instruction, and you want to have more than 6 people at your flying site. Now, as it happens, it's exactly the same 5 steps we've already talked about. The assessment process is exactly the same, but you're targeting it at specific hazards, and that's any hazard that may cause transmission of the virus. So you're not looking at cutting yourself with propellers or anything like that. We're talking about how can we prevent transmission of the virus in this case. So things like, and it's probably going to be the most common one, almost every flying site, I would think, the padlock on the gate. It's a shared point, so that's one of your hazards, that could cause virus transmission. So you identify that. You then need to identify the controls about that. So sanitize your hands before you unlock the gate, sanitize immediately afterwards. Okay. So the actual COVID risk assessment, exactly the same process. Okay. We have also got a COVID risk assessment template form. I spelled form wrong on there. Never mind. Which again, if you go on the clubsupport.bmfa.uk website and the 6 steps to COVID secure page, you can download that, and there's various other guidance and advice on that one there. So Terry has put a valid point in the chat. So if you'd like to raise that one, Terry, we'll talk briefly about that, because I think it is something that all the clubs need to be thinking about.
Yeah, I think if you look at the government's advice, which has, let's say, developed over the past few weeks, because of us flying outside, we are going to be able to proceed with model flying. However, the track and trace is going to be a pressure for the clubs, because we have to have a mechanism in place at a club level to track who is at the field, when and where.
Yeah.
Because if we do have a COVID outbreak, we need to be able to provide that information to NHS England and the like, so that they can follow their mechanisms through. I think we've set up a barcode at Heart of England where we can scan it on your phone, and it's just a little template, you know, and I think it's on a spreadsheet or something on the cloud, and you just put your details in. But we do need to sort of address that at a club level.
Yeah.
Can I just...
go on, Kevin. I suspect you're going to say what I was about to say, but go for it.
Sorry. I was about to say that I've just been dealing with the very same thing today. You will be aware that the NHS COVID-19 app is now available.
Yes.
Also online now, you can put your location in, put your notify people in, and you'll get a 3D barcode which is specific to a location. So if you're 2 flying sites, you'll need to do it twice with the address. And then people just scan that and add their details as and when they, attend your flying sites.
Yeah, and I mean, Kevin, it's covered by normal good practice, isn't it, at a club level? Because if you have an attendance book, which most of us do, that sort of puts it to bed to some degree.
Yeah, I'm not a great lover of attendance books, particularly with not with COVID-19. No.
No.
I think you've got a point of contact there that you can eliminate.
Yes,
indeed.
And there are many ways you can do it. You can do it by WhatsApp, a specific person who's given the authority to deal with that. You can do it with the 3D barcodes, like I've just said, or you can just do it with a simple text. Or filling a simple form in and posting it through a letterbox. There's loads of different ways, and it's got to be really the way that suits your club. There's no right way. They all work.
I've organised a few events at Buckminster over the past couple of months, all COVID secure, and everybody, once they've arrived on site, has texted me as soon as they've arrived, and that's what we've been doing.
And it's just to have that information somewhere, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
You've got to keep it for 21 days, and then after that, it's no longer required. However, as I said, things have moved on. It was a couple of weeks ago, I actually sat down one evening and developed an app for doing this, which revolved around the QR codes. So you turn up at site, scan a QR code, you get a little page on your phone, you put your details in, and it logs it for the club, updates a spreadsheet, which the club have access to. So I just finished all that, sent it to the chief exec, who then promptly come back and said, that's a brilliant idea. The government are starting to do that as well. And that's the NHS COVID app.
Forward thinking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which I think we're pretty much going to be recommending that all clubs should sign on and use that. I've been in 2 places today. I called in for a rather nice and rather large breakfast, as Charlie on there will agree, on my way home from Buckminster this morning. And that's the first thing I did when I walked in, was scan the QR code that was posted on the wall, which logged me in if there's any issue arises. The good thing is, if you look into how it works, you're not actually sharing any information with anybody. It's just logging it on your phone, and then if the venue itself flags up as an issue, you will get a notification on your phone, and you can then go get tested. So it looks to be, assuming it works like it's supposed to work, like it is the solution, I think, for clubs. But of course, we still have a very small amount, I think, of people without smartphones. So you perhaps do need to have something in place just to cater for those, whether it is a logbook. It's not the ideal situation because it's a shared point of contact, but if you are going to use a logbook, sanitize before and afterwards, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, you'll be telling me people are still using Glow and glow plugs next.
They are indeed. I've actually seen some glow plugs this past couple of days at Buckminster, believe it or not. Yeah. So, Felix, you've got your hand up there. Would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, it's more of a less of a question, but more of a case of what we actually do with our club at the moment. We use a thing called Telegram, and every time you enter the Telegram or post on it, it records your name, the time that you do it, and the date. So we simply leave a message: arrived and departed. And for us, that seems to be working.
Yeah.
But I must admit, I do like the idea of the QR code. I think that's probably even simpler.
Well, it is, yeah. I think it's perhaps something, it's taken them a while, but it is perhaps something that the government have got right in all this. I believe so anyway. So.
The QR code wouldn't necessarily work if you're going slope soaring in different locations, though, would it?
No,
Yeah,
but that's not a specific venue, though, is it? So in those situations, it depends on the type of. If it's a specifically organised event, yes, they can print a QR code for the event. You can do that, but if it's just you're going out to a slope somewhere to do some slope soaring, you just stick to your maximum group of 6 and social distancing. Okay.
Is it necessary to stick to 6 if you do the track and trace? I mean, for example, last Friday, 7 of us went to Bo Peep, and there was 7 in our group, and there was another group there of similar sort of number a bit further down the hill.
Is it a recognised club site?
No.
Right.
We don't have any club slope soaring sites.
Right. Okay. It's probably a very grey area, is that?
I was going to say, Robin, from my experience, you've got the groups of 6 is now enshrined in law, which is one of the differences. So it's not guidance anymore. And you have 2 groups of 6.
Yeah.
As long as those 2 groups don't mix with each other or interact with each other, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
In that situation, it's very much like going to the park.
Yeah.
And taking part in what would be described as informal sport. So you couldn't have 7 friends go to the park for a kickabout with a football, and that would be a breach. 6 of you could, and 6 of you could, even if there's another 6 people already having a kickabout, as long as you don't join in with them. Okay.
Okay. An example of the very grey areas.
Yeah, there's always going to be some grey areas. The club flying site is an outdoor sports facility. And in that case, because it's an outdoor sports facility, and if you're following guidance from your national governing body, the rule of 6 we're exempt from. But you should still maintain your social distancing, and we would still recommend you don't gather in groups bigger than 6. But you're only exempt from that if you've done the COVID risk assessment and you've got a track and trace protocol in place. Okay, so that it is a bit different, shall we say, a random slope, but to a recognised club flying site, which I've had this conversation a couple of times over the past couple of weeks. You're not just going to stand in a field if you're going to a recognised model flying club site. You're going to an outdoor sporting facility. We're very fortunate that certain people like Martin Dilley and various other, primarily from the free flight community, got us recognised as a sport back in the 80s, I think it was. Which means currently we can, certainly at clubs, we can carry on pretty much as we have, with just a few minor inconveniences to put into place. So that's the COVID risk assessment covered. I've got a hand up from Nigel Kent.
Oh yeah, I'm Nigel Kent from AMARC. We've got an online booking tool, which seems to be working pretty well at the moment. There's only 2 people in a club who haven't got access to a computer, and they ring me up on the telephone, or they ask the person they're flying with to book them in on their behalf. And then we produce a chart that shows as and when people are booking, and we have a maximum amount of people that can book in any one of the 3 sessions, no more than 8 people. It blanks out and will not let you book, so you can go on to the next session.
Yeah, no, that's excellent.
Seems to be working pretty well.
I mean, just because we can theoretically have more than 6 at the flying site doesn't mean it's a good idea. So you've got to assess that risk that's involved. One of the elements in the COVID risk assessment that you're looking at is your flying site, what space you've got, how easy it is to maintain social distancing. And one of the controls there is to limit the people on site to a suitable number. Okay, so yeah, booking in system, I think they're a very good idea myself. Thank you for that one. Barry, your hands up. Question?
Yeah, it's just a comment as well, Andy, about the QR code. I think it's a great idea. Again, in our club, we've got a couple of Luddites who don't have smartphones. But the thing I found out today was, as well, my wife has an iPhone 6, and of course that's now too old to use the new system. I don't know how that impacts with Android phones, if there's a cutoff there as well. So I'm quite interested to hear some of the other alternates that people have come up with, particularly this one called Telegram. Might be interesting, just if that's not sort of bound to a specific version of iOS or Android.
Yeah.
I mean, we use WhatsApp at the moment, and we've been using that since we were allowed back on the flying field.
I must admit, when he said he was using Telegram, I thought somebody was going to pipe up, say they were using Messenger Pigeon next. But yeah, I mean, we're always going to have this with any technological solution. That there are going to be people that aren't quite up to speed on the technology side. I believe on Android, it does need to be above a certain version.
Likewise, the latest Huawei are not included either.
Yeah. That's an interesting one. Yeah. So nothing, I suspect, is infallible. We have to take the reasonable steps. As in most things that we do, we have to take reasonable steps. So it's reasonable to use the NHS COVID app for everybody who's got a smartphone that it will work with.
Yeah.
Apart from the fact they'll probably be using that for everything else that they do. If you do go into a shop or the government are highly recommending to any business that they use the QR code and the NHS app. So I think we perhaps need to perhaps recommend that throughout where possible, but have a backup in place of some form. So right. So Gordon.
Yeah, hi. A couple of things. I'm told because the iPhone 6 doesn't do the NHS app, but I'm told with the latest iOS update, which is a few days old, which is 14, it upgrades the Bluetooth so you can use it, but I haven't confirmed that yet.
You're not able to put iOS 14 on an iPhone 6.
You can't?
No, it only goes up to iOS 12.
Gotcha. I'll cross that one out then. When you've completed the COVID risk assessment and you've put a system of track and trace in place, how do you demonstrate that to allow your club then to take more than 6 legally?
You don't actually need to demonstrate it unless you're asked to. You don't have to register it anywhere. This is one of the things we spent a bit of time clarifying with the DCMS, Department of Culture, Media and Sport, who it is very much a self-assessment process and you can declare yourself as COVID secure. But apart from the risk assessment and track and trace process is a requirement. That's a specified legal requirement. Okay.
So we wouldn't. So once we've completed it, we wouldn't register it with yourself, for instance.
No, there's no need to. You've got to satisfy yourself that you've done this, and then obviously your risk assessment and your track and trace process is there for, so you can show it to anybody who specifically asks.
Okay.
Okay.
We've got the same system with the same issues with some members not having smartphones. Some people not even having mobile phones themselves, actually. So we've put in a logbook system, which we're going to put into a case along with gel and other bits and bobs for those people that can't access an online system. But I'd be interesting to see the Telegram working, because we do need some sort of online system, I think, to make it work. And somebody mentioned an online booking system, which I'm assuming is different. What was that called?
I'm not sure who it was that mentioned that one.
I think
we've got it on our website. It's a free app you can attach and bolt onto your website, and people can just log in. And then we've got a little pull down menu. It says flying bookings. They tick the box the time they want to fly. They put their email address in, their name, and that goes through to a central database. And I get a copy, and our webmaster gets a copy. I think I just showed it up on the screen. And then we take that, and it comes out in an Excel spreadsheet, so we can see and monitor how many people are flying at what times of the day, what's our peak time and what's not.
Has that app got a name at all?
I can find out for you and email it. If you just put in the email address on, I'll find out from our webmaster.
Lovely. Cheers. Thank you.
Right. John, you don't know what it is, do you, John Britton?
No, not off the top of my head, Nigel. No, he did say it once what it was, but I don't remember off the top of my head. No,
it's Word something, is it?
Yeah, we'll be just guessing away. I can't remember. I'll go and have a look on the WhatsApp. You might be on a WhatsApp.
There are a number of options that do work.
It's a freebie.
Sheets, Google Sheets is one. Google Forms. If you've got a Google.
There's one called Shot, which was developed by a yachting club, which might be the one you're referring to. SHOTT, I think it is.
The getting QR codes is very straightforward. You can create a QR code just online in seconds. And what it will do, anybody who scans it will be taken to a specific web page. So if your club website, if you've got a form on there, an online form, and then create the QR code, so they turn up, scan it, takes them straight to the club website, put the name, time of arrival in, and that's one quick and easy way of doing it. Which is basically what I developed and what we now starting to use at Buckminster as well. On arrival, Manny will be getting people to scan the QR code. It fills a form in online. It generates a spreadsheet which is updated automatically whenever the QR code is scanned. So there are a number of options. Very straightforward.
I think this is still fairly new to a lot of people. I rather suspect that in 6 months' time it will not be new to anybody. It's something we'll have to do wherever we go. So it's something we will get used to.
That's why I would suggest you use the NHS COVID app, because you'll be using that wherever you go. You just literally open up the app, click on register arrival, scan a QR code, and that's it. You don't have to put your name in. You don't have to do anything other than scan a QR code. That's all that's required. So it's definitely a good way forward. Right, we've got a number of hands up. So let's start at the top of the list. Dave Perrott.
Evening, everybody. We've got indoor sessions picking up now. We've got a risk assessment in place already, but I know there's been some restrictions on indoor sports in this latest government thing. Are we still okay as long as we've got mitigation in place for more than 6 indoors?
I wouldn't want to say for definite yet. I'm still investigating that along with the chief exec between us.
Okay.
I feel you may have a problem from my initial reading up, but I'm not prepared to make that an official statement just yet.
That's the feeling I had as well.
Yeah, I think you may have a problem. Yeah. Okay. And
Thanks.
Terry again. Terry?
Yeah, it was going back to the booking system. I mean, obviously, there's lots of options out there and there's lots of variants. We're using the QR code. We are. I think we're using the one that you put up on the BMFA website. That works really well. But pen and paper works. You know, and if you've got people who haven't got new phones or older phones,
pen and paper doesn't work. Pen and paper and sanitizer works.
Yes, yes, technical, yes,
yeah,
yeah. So, and obviously, if you like you say, it's that mitigation, isn't it? Because you are introducing another contact point, and you're introducing another risk. So then you need to mitigate that, and as long as you do with the hand sanitizer, then it's okay to use that. I think the important thing is we need to be able to demonstrate we have the information of attendance. Yes. Is the important thing for us. You know, it doesn't matter where it is, but we need to be able to access it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And then, as I say, you will need to keep that for 21 days as well. So, you know, once after 21 days, you can get rid. Okay. And then Chris, who is now then, Chris, how are you?
I'm very well. I've been very quiet, you notice.
Yeah, no, I thought you. I assumed that your microphone had broken.
No such luck for you. Just one thing, the creator free web calendar is Brown Bear.
Brown
the
Bear.
Name of Brown Bear.
Okay, excellent.
We've done a risk assessment at Retford, and we've talked about most of the things you have. But what we're doing with we put a locked cabinet in where all the members have had to agree that they can have the combination number to get into it. Inside is a pro forma, which is just simple membership number, time of arrival, obviously the date, and time of departure. And what we're doing is every second or third day is we're taking a WhatsApp picture of it and sending it in to be recorded, which is simple and works well. But we have members that don't have smartphones and object to having so many ins in their WhatsApp because each time somebody goes in and out, the WhatsApp records to everybody in the group.
Yeah.
Gets messy.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, perhaps just an easier one. It's just a text message to somebody.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. I think we've got through all that bout of questions. I've only actually got one slide left anyway, pretty much from that, which is the customary and traditional and finally bit. But we did actually cover this. So when you've completed your risk assessment, don't just file it away. Technically speaking, you haven't actually completed it if you do that. You need to share it and any updates with all your members. There's no point identifying a hazard, assessing the risk, implementing a control of the risk without telling them. So make sure you do that, and any updates as soon as you've got them, and then hopefully that's pretty much risk assessments dealt with. Hopefully demystified them a little bit. So any questions? Gordon, your hand up.
Yeah, I've completed a COVID risk assessment for the site. I used to do it as part of my occupation. So it's reasonably comprehensive. I'm just wondering, is there a potential to be able to share other people's to have a quick look? And I know they're not going to be specific to each site, but it saves reinventing the wheel sometimes. So there'll be communal hazards, communal solutions.
If anybody is happy to share their COVID risk assessment, if you wanted to email it into me, I could probably set up a depository for them on the club support website. So
perfect.
Specific folder, and then you can all have a look. And so obviously I will assume if anybody sends me it, unless you tell me otherwise in your email, if you're just sending it for us to review, please make it clear. But if you're happy for it to be shared, make that very, very clear. And then in that case, I will add it into a downloads folder on the club support website.
Yeah,
lovely.
I think, can I just say one thing we didn't specifically cover is that if any person is thinking of attending with COVID-19 symptoms, self-isolating, being notified by track and trace, or feeling unwell in any way, they must stay away from the flying site until it's safe for them to go back or after appropriate quarantine. And that needs to be made very, very clear on any risk assessment.
Yeah,
it's a prerequisite.
Absolutely, yeah, that does need to be in there. The you know, just on that, I mean, hopefully you've all got reasonable constitutions that allows the committee to implement rules on a safety basis that then get ratified at your next general meeting. I think in this instance, it would be entirely appropriate, reasonable and sensible for clubs to implement a rule that if anybody has been instructed to self-isolate, that they are not allowed to attend the field. And if they do, I would go so far as to suggest that's gross misconduct on the individual's part. If they've been told to self-isolate and then they are attending the field, they are putting your other club members at risk. So it's something to think about. You know, but as I say, in my view, it's probably bordering on gross misconduct. So, okay, Gordon.
Yeah, you covered me. Thanks.
Oh, right. Sorry, you forgot to put your hand down, or I didn't put it down for you. Chris, was that you again?
Yes. Funny enough, today I've just put our risk assessment and the rules of the field onto our website, which anybody can go and have a look at if they want to. One thing we have done is we decided as a committee exactly what you said between us to add a further rule that if anybody doesn't sign the book and he's found to have contravened the instructions for signing in and out, there's a 4-week ban from flying. And I think that had to be spelt out to them, which the most of the members I spoke to last weekend that were flying were supporting.
Yeah. It's there are unfortunately an awful lot of people out there, I'm not just talking about in model flying clubs, but in the world in general at the moment, who just don't realise how serious it is. They think it's all a bit of a conspiracy, or it's just not that serious, that the risks aren't great. Personally, I think they're quite irresponsible, these people. Daft as it sounds, we obviously put out on social media the guidance we put for model flying after the 14th of September. Somebody put on Facebook yesterday that it's all part of a conspiracy to get model flying out of the sky so the government can sell the airspace to Amazon. So COVID is a conspiracy to stop model aircraft flying, would you believe? So it's
I did comment.
Yeah, well, you know, I did as well. I think I managed to avoid being rude to him. Just we do. Right. Okay. Any further questions? Anybody? We all. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Yeah. Everybody got everything they need out of that. Hope you all enjoyed it. And,
Lovely. Well done.
Right, thank you all for joining us again. I am planning further club support seminars. Potentially, we might have another guest speaker some point next month from Azolve, who provide us with the Go membership portal. So we'll perhaps talk about getting the best out of that. Potentially give you an option to look at and question them about the Club Plus side of things, which if you can't have your normal club nights collecting money off people, might be something that's worth considering. So I'm looking at that at some point in October once I've probably got Phil Robinson from Azolve teed up. You'll have to be getting up early because he's across in America. So Felix, you have a question? You'll have to unmute yourself first.
Hear me now?
Yep, that's better.
Yeah. I was just wondering whether it would be improper to actually ask a question about how we deal with AGMs during this meeting, or whether I should contact you separately?
No, it's not improper at all. I would suggest it's probably not the most responsible thing at the moment to have a face-to-face meeting. So you're going to need to be flexible, I think, to have perhaps use Zoom.
Well, that's exactly what we were hoping to do, but I might actually come back to you perhaps another time and ask you more about that.
Well, we could perhaps schedule in a Zoom session about AGMs if you like.
Oh, yes.
How does that sound, everybody?
Very handy. Very handy.
Click the yes box if you'd be interested. All right, go on then. Go on. Yes, we'll do it. Right. Okay. So what we actually what I'm going to do right before I
the only issue with Zoom meetings